In March 2008, we saw the debut of the Spectacular Spider-Man. For the uninitiated, the Spectacular Spider-Man was intended to bring the Spider-Man of the comics by Stan Lee, creator of the character, and Marvel pioneer, Steve Ditko, and John Romita Sr. to the kids raised on Sam Raimi's live-action trilogy. The result was an animated series with the action and flair of Raimi's early 2000s Spider-Man movies, camp of 60s comic books, and Stan Lee's signature humanity. To call it a home run would be an understatement. The series is one of the few examples of a children's show that, instead of catering to children, challenges them. Much like Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Star Wars, The Clone Wars, it did a wonderful job of introducing conflicts that were compelling to adults and children alike, but in a manner that was child appropriate. Anyone who's ever tried writing something family-friendly will tell you it's a difficult line to walk. To be completely and uncontroversially appropriate for kids while still creating stories that anyone of any age might be interested in is a feat to behold. Collider Video of the Day. In its short tenure, the series dealt with issues of substance abuse, gambling addictions, financial stress, mental health, and so much more. Not to mention the fact that it put together compelling mysteries and stories. I originally watched this show as a child when it first aired. Coming back to it years later at the age of 21, I had forgotten just how good it was at using red herrings and plot twists. There were multiple episodes where I could not predict the twist, where I didn't know what was going to happen next in the mystery, and where the reveals were beyond satisfying. As someone who literally gets paid to watch television, it can be hard to catch me off guard, to really get me sucked into a mystery. It doesn't happen often. Yet, this family-friendly Spider-Man show managed to have me on the edge of my more than once. All that being said, it's not perfect. The 20-minute runtime definitely hurt the show. After you account for the intro and outro, there are maybe only 17 to 18 minutes left, in which time they usually go over the backstory for the villain, continue whatever is happening in Peter Parker's life, have our hero and villain engage at least twice in the episode, all before tying up into a neat bow. It's tight. Especially as an adult who's more used to 40-minute dramas and feature-length films, the ridiculously fast pace can be off-putting at times. Still, even when the show feels a bit fast-paced, it still manages to construct compelling stories. One thing I really appreciated about the show was the emphasis it put on the existence of organized crime in New York. On the one hand it allowed writers to expedite villain backstories for time's sake because anything could be easily justified through the organized crime scenes, but more importantly than that, it added an extra fun layer to the Spider-Man universe that is rarely explored. The crime politics between gangs ended up being one of the most compelling parts of the story to me on my most recent watch, even with how little time gets dedicated to it. The writers do a great job setting up a fascinating political struggle between Peter's many enemies. That's all before we've even begun talking about the amazing cast of characters. I've hinted at the fact that Peter himself, played by Josh Keaton, was well done, but I can't stress this enough, he's honestly the perfect mix between Tobey Maguire's nerdy down-to-earth Parker and Andrew Garfield's charismatic Spider-Man. Surrounding Peter, we have a great Gwen Stacy, played by Lacey Chabert, the most compelling Flash Thompson, played by Josh LaBarre, I've ever seen in Spider-Man media, the only worthwhile Liz Allen, played by Alana Ubach, in non-comic book Spider-Man media, and the most Stan Lee faithful MJ I've ever seen, played by Vanessa Marshall. Even that's just scratching the surface. I simply don't have enough time to go through all the extremely well done characters in the immense cast list. The only character I found myself wanting a little more from was Harry Osborn, played by James Arnold Taylor, which is odd because usually Harry is easy to get right. Ultimately, Harry's story should have been compelling, but I just found his whiny rich loser persona too distasteful given the situation his best friend, Peter, is in and how little he ever does to help. Although I can appreciate that to the target audience, children that can't comprehend how truly privileged Harry is, it might be more forgivable. If it was as good as I say it is, then how on earth did it get cancelled after only 2 seasons? Short answer, Hollywood bullshit. See, in 2009 Disney acquired Marvel while Sony still had a deal that gave them rights to Spider-Man. Some closed-door deals occurred between Disney's Marvel and Sony, which ultimately led to Sony relinquishing some TV rights to Spider-Man in exchange for being able to produce more Spider-Man movies, but they retained ownership of all the resources for Spectacular Spider-Man, character designs, storylines, etc. The result was neither Disney nor Sony possessed the sufficient rights to continue the story, and given the profitability of the show relative to each company's size, it likely just wasn't worth the struggle to acquire the rights. Or maybe Disney sought that resolution intentionally out of a desire to conform their animated Spider-Man to the style of their other Marvel animated shows. Either way, it was a frustrating end to a series that only seemed to get better with every episode. In 2021, 12 years after the show originally ended in 2009, #Save Spectacular Spider-Man managed to make it to number 9 trending on Twitter, so clearly the show still maintains a dedicated fan base. Unfortunately, though, Given all the time that's passed, how complicated Spider-Man rights seem to have become behind the scenes, and the strange position the spectacular Spider-Man itself was caught in, it's unlikely either studio will, and doubtful if they even could, take steps to recreate it, leaving Greg Weisman's, the mastermind behind the show, Peter Parker, to always be the Spider-Man that deserved better.